Welcome once again to another rendition of the RTI webinars. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your busy schedules. I know the amount of time and dedication by the international and US and all over the world, let's just put it that way, is just astounding. That's why we love to do those shout outs and say hello and hear from where everybody's from. It's just amazing to us that companies such as RTI that prides itself on making the experience for the client elevated to such a high level on both the commercial and residential side is just such a widely accepted way of doing it throughout the entire world. And we couldn't be more thrilled to be talking and speaking with you about the different types of tools that we can offer you to ensure that your clients are gaining access to the ultimate in control and automation systems. And frankly, we want to make sure that the fastest custom installation ever is also the best custom installation ever. So this topic today here, the XP Diagnostic, is something that I think is an underutilized tool, and something that once you understand how you can use it to your benefit, will reduce the amount of possible frustrations, but even more so that you'll go into a job much more confident in your abilities and making sure that it works each and every time. So today we're going to talk a little bit about what that series is that's coming up, and we already talked about it a little bit, but I want to show you, kind of talk about when you'll see those. We also want to talk about what the benefits of using this tool are. And again, it's the one thing to be able to go into the programming side, but you need to understand what the benefit is. Why do you want to do this? Why would you use this tool? Obviously, we want to spend most of our time showing you it, showing how it works, the different options that are available within it, the different ways to self-diagnose any potential issues or solve any potential hurdles that you may run into, or even more so to make sure and ensure that communication is solid each and every time. So we'll spend a lot of time going through the programming aspect on it, how to use it. At the end, we want to make sure that your questions are answered. So we'll leave some time at the end. But if you do have questions as we go through, Vincent's on today. I've got a couple other panelists from RTI on. So feel free to post them in the question answer section of the Zoom software, and we'll get those answered right away. And then, of course, we'll leave some time at the end if there's certain things that you want to see. And the first part, the XP Diagnostic, what is this thing? What is this tool that we're talking about here? Well, the first part about the XP Diagnostic driver that you need to understand is that it provides you an in-depth look as to what is going on in the processor, but not just the processor, the operations within the processor, how it's communicating with devices, whether it's RTI or third-party controlled devices, whether it's checking out the different macro strings on the fly to understand how they work. It's understanding the difference between the different types of communications, making sure and ensuring that they work each and every time, the issuance of commands, being able to test those, what the system manager is doing at that time, being able to check your events and automation sequences that will happen so that you can ensure that they work each and every time. That's how they, and how you expect them to. And of course, making sure that you understand what the feedback is and how that's being pulled into the processor and being showcased for your clients. And more importantly, it gives you the ability to kind of write down, for lack of a better term, what might be happening in the system, so that if you do need to call into technical support with an issue, you have a full log of information about what that process looks like. If you create this log of information and almost like a test bed of what you've tried, it will reduce the amount of time you have to spend on technical support with them to going through the things you've already done, right? So we want to make sure that you will you have an understanding of where all these things are, how to navigate to them, how to populate that information, and more importantly, how to read it. Now, in terms of the programming side of things, I'm going to jump over to Integration Designer here real quick, and let me change my screen over to it. All right. And Vincent, one more time,
Yes, sir, you're good.
Thank you. All right, so Integration Designer. Now, first and foremost, Integration Designer 11, just as things that I want to make sure that you're aware of. First, Integration Designer 11.3 requires you to have a 64-bit machine with Windows 10 or higher as its native OS. I keep saying this on every webinar that we do, but it's vitally important. Not so much with the XP Diagnostic right now, but as we continue to make new iterations of that Toolbox or the Toolbox devices that we're using, or the drivers that are being added to the different products or the new products that are launching. You need to make sure that you have those two things in order to run Integration Designer 11 effectively. The second part about this is that you need to make sure that the processor itself is actually online and on that, or not necessarily online, but on the network for which you are utilizing it. Now, that being said, if you're in network with that client, that's great. If you have a way to VPN to be able to have access to the processor on that network, that's fine too. But the important part is that the processor does have to be on the network in order for this to happen. You can't plug in a USB cable to be able to have access to it. You can't plug in RS-232 directly to it. You need to be able to have access to it through the network. The other part about this is that when you're talking about what you're looking for in terms of communication, it's important for those things to be properly set up and making sure that when you're adding in the necessary control drivers or adding in the Zigbee transceivers or setting up the devices with virtual panel, RTI panel, that you're taking your time and going through the setup of them first. For example, if we were to click on, say, and I'll just use this one as a base example, the RTI 8064 driver that I have in here, if you don't take the time to go through here and select exactly how it's connected, where it's connected from, what it's utilizing, and the XP Diagnostic driver doesn't know how to connect through the processor to be able to pull that data in. So it's important for you to set up the system and then add in the XP Diagnostic driver, okay? Now, the other part about this is take your time setting up the devices, whether they're network, RS-232, IR, take your time in setting them up, making sure that to double check the connection ports on them, making sure to double check the wiring on them. And I know these are all little things that you're thinking, well, Tyler, these are things that I do every day. But I want to reiterate the importance of it, because sometimes it's not the processor. Sometimes it's not the device. Sometimes it's just that it's a bad network cable. And so taking your time to make sure and ensuring that communication method, whether it's network, whether it's Zigbee, is solid, is part of it. Now, that being said, the XP Diagnostic driver will also give you additional information, basically saying, hey, I was able to pull information from it, but now I'm not. That could give you an idea that maybe that cable is going bad or there's something in the wall chewing it. Who knows? But the point I'm trying to make is that by taking your time initially, going through and setting it up step by step, and understanding that if you don't know how to already control the device, don't expect to control it with RTI. Make sure that you have an understanding of how that device works, what's expected of it in terms of the command structure, what type of feedback is potential with it, and have an understanding of how the device works before you try to control it with RTI. And again, we can't teach you how to, say, set up a Lutron system. We can't train you on how to do that on the Lutron side of things. But the important part is that if you have taken the training with RTI, you know what that naming structure is. Well, we're going to use that similar in the drivers as an example. So please take your time when setting these devices up. That's the first step in using the XP Diagnostic driver. Now, the system I have set up today, for our example, is an XP6 as the main processor. I have an XP3 actually set up as an expansion processor. I have an ESC2 as an expansion device as well. I've utilized a T2X, T4X, and RK1 Plus 4-button device in-wall keypad. So I want to show you the different ways that the communication will come across, and you'll see how those are set up. In terms of the communication, the T4X will be communicating via Zigbee to that XP3 expansion processor on a separate network than the T2X will via direct connection to that XP6's ZM24. A little bit, just give you a little background on that, or to give you an idea on what that system looks like. In terms of the overall structure, it's just a simple workstation, single room. I've got a number of different sources set up in here, such as the weather driver, RTI music, and the MS1. I've got an RTI 8064 driver, a Roku 4K Ultrabox set up as well. I've got a Samsung TV set up as infrared. And the 8064 or the 84X that I'm utilizing is going to be zone 1 in that workstation room. It's important just to understand where those are. The other source that I have in here is a please wait page, and you'll see where that comes into play as well down the line. Okay, so that's kind of the structure of what this is. Now, once you've created this structure and you've said, okay, I've gone in, I've said the device, that I'm going to be using 84X, the serial connection, and what serial connection I'm going to be using. In this case, I'm going to actually use the ESC2 port 1. And I'll show you what that looks like here in a second. The other part about this is, say, the RTI music, where you'll need to, if you have one plugged in, you'll need to make sure that the device information, serial information is set up there so that we can pull that data. And on the Roku side of things, I set it up based on an IP address to the IP address I assigned for it. That's the base scenario of how this device is set up. Once you've got these set up, then we need to go in and add the XP Diagnostic driver. So we'll click on the Add Workspace Item window, toolbar icon. We'll select the Drivers tab, the beautiful new integrated driver library that we put into Integration Designer 11, which saves so much time. And then I'm just going to do a simple search for XP DIAG Diagnostics, and there it is. And I'm going to put it in the global area just because I want it for the overall system itself. Now, that being said, you'll notice that there's, of course, the more information, which will give you additional information about what we're talking here about today, so that if you do have questions about the different areas, you can definitely refer to it simply by clicking that driver information, and it will provide you a whole bunch of information right here. The other part that I want to mention is that we wrote this driver ourselves. It's certified, but there's not going to be any sort of pages or anything like that. So if I click next, you'll see that it's, the standard pages are selected there. I'm not using it. There's not pages to be had. So you can either leave these checked or unchecked. Nothing's going to be created for it necessarily. So in this case, I just add that in. It's going to add it to my global area as the XP Diagnostic driver. And I'm going to close this real quick. Now, the thing I want to show you in terms of the XP Diagnostic driver in terms of setup is that you'll see that it's set for the main processor right here. However, if I drop this down, you'll see that the XP3 expansion device processor is also on there. If I want to use the XP Diagnostic driver and get information from that expansion processor, I will need to add in a secondary instance of the XP Diagnostic driver itself and assign it to that separate processor. So let me reiterate. If you've got one XP Diagnostic driver on the main processor and that's what all the information you need, you're in good shape. Just use the default for master. However, in our case, when we have the expansion XP3 processor and I want to be able to pull data in from it, I'm going to need to add a separate instance of that XP Diagnostic driver. Case in point, if I'm utilizing, say, a T4X, and I'm going to assign it to communicate via Zigbee to that XP3, we need to go to the File, System Properties, configure our Zigbee networks, and then I'm going to create a new network to it and assign that and drag the T4X to that XP3 processor. Now, as I set this up, once I send this to the processor itself, obviously I'll need to power cycle the T4X, get it close to the XP3 and have it be able to communicate there. But if I want to be able to make sure to be able to pull the XP Diagnostic Zigbee data from the expansion processor, I'll need another instance of the XP Diagnostic driver set up in the system, but then assigned to that XP3 processor. So with this setup, as I've done here, I'll now go and add a secondary version or a second instance of that processor, of that driver, the XP Diagnostic driver. Hit next. Just hit add device again, but this time I'm going to do XP Diagnostic XP3. Add the device in, I close it, go to the XP Diagnostic number 2, and of course you can rename this. So if you have expansion processors, you could right click on it, rename it, and we could just name it XP Diagnostics XP3. It's named as such. We go to the properties of it, and we will drop this down and select that XP3 processor. And now the XP Diagnostics will pull the information and show us what's going on that XP3 processor instead of the XP6S. Okay, so that's the first step in regards to getting this, getting it set up on the system itself. Once you have the diagnostic driver set up or placed in and set up where you need to go, then we're going to need to go ahead and load it into the system. So I'm going to hit the Send System button here and just load it in, to that XP6S that I have on my network. So we'll load that in real quick. Second. Right. And I'm also going to load in the information for the T4X because it is now going to be communicating via Zigbee with that separate Zigbee network to that device. So I'm going to go ahead and send that real quick over the network. And then I'm going to go ahead and send, I'll send the RK1 data as per requested by Integration Designer to its, there we go, done and done. Beautiful. All right. And we'll go ahead and close that window out. So everything's been sent. We're in good shape here. I've done some fun things with my devices that will enhance what we're talking about here. So now that we've got that data or the files loaded into the processor, I can now go up to my Communications tab. I can select the Show Devices on Local Network, and then I can simply just click on the IP address for this processor as well as the XP3. Upon clicking this XP6 IP address, it will open a separate window that will show the diagnostics for the XP6S based on the IP address. Now, you don't always have to click on that if you want to type in the IP address from, say, like a mobile device or a tablet or something to be able to check things as you're going around. You certainly can do that. You don't always have to click on that as long as if you know that IP address, you'll be able to pull that information in. Okay. Once we have the XP Diagnostic driver built, let me backtrack real quick. Pardon me a moment here. And I want to also open up this guy. There's the XP3. So now I've got both diagnostics windows open. Hopefully you can see both of them here. There's the XP6S and there's my XP3 expansion. All right, so let's begin with just a quick overview. You've got 3, 6, 9 different tabs here that you can utilize. Just a real quick overview of what these are. Status will give you basic system status, IP addresses, MAC, firmware, memory usage, all that kind of fun stuff. Drivers will give you all the loaded source drivers that we have in the system. RTI panel will be all the RTI panel and virtual panel connections. Zigbee will be all the Zigbee-based communication devices. And again, we'll go through all these one by one, so don't fret. UPnP will show all the UPnP-based discovery devices that are on the network that you are currently on, including any ESC2 devices. Hey, there it is. And this is actually very valuable for you because as you get them set up, if you're not quite sure what that MAC address is of that device or that IP address, this is a good way to be able to find it real quick without having to actually have it configured in the system yet. If it's plugged in and in the network, it'll find it here. System variables is where you can be able to monitor all the system variables or system flags in the system. And then the flags are going to be all the flags that you have set up on your all the system macro flag, all the system-based flags that you have and can monitor, all the internal logic. Log will be the log of all those items that you want to test, whether it's buttons or what's going on with the expansion devices, any of the drivers and what's currently going on with that so that you can test different scenarios. And then the get report will give you a file copy of what you have tested, all the status and logging information of the entire system, as you can see right here. So let's dive into these real quick. So the first one I want to talk about is the status one. And with the status one, it's important to understand that the status, it's base information as it is important to take a look at a couple of things. One, if you're having trouble with, say, if you're having trouble identifying it via IP or MAC address, or even you're not quite sure what firmware it is, this is an easy way to identify it quickly. We do have a lot of this information already set up on Integration Designer for you, but if you happen to need to pull this right away and you're off-site and VPNing in or logging into a computer that you have on site, say in a commercial environment, you can easily see what's going on, and especially with the uptime and understanding, okay, when how long the system has been running since its last reset. So if the client complains that, hey, the system keeps, reverting back to its original way of doing things, the buttons that I push aren't working the right way, you may want to check the uptime to see if there's something going on with the power of the power monitoring of the system, and understanding that, if this thing is maybe getting power cycled for some crazy reason, every couple of days, do we need to check to see what that power source is from, a strip? Is the strip going bad? Is it causing this to happen and causing that issue to happen? It's also important to note that the memory and the system variable load information is also right here, so that if the system is getting large, and you're starting to reach a system variable load, as an example of like 80%, you may want to try to reduce the installed drivers, or maybe try a secondary system in the mix to reduce that overall load, as an example. There are certain little aspects about this. We also, with the latest iteration of Integration Designer, give you some of this information, or give you a lot of this information right on there as well. And if you haven't seen that, let me show that to you real quick. I apologize here. Boom. So if you were to take your cursor, close the window, and hover over, say, the global area, you'll now see that the pop window that says system usage will give you a lot of that information. And you'll notice that the system variable says 3% of capacity, as an example, or the driver counts. That's all valuable information that is now available here, versus, say, having to do it on just on the diagnostic driver itself. Okay, but you do have access to it right here. The second tab, Drivers tab. This tab provides information regarding the status of each installed driver. What do I mean by that? Well, it tells you, is this driver being run constantly? How much CPU percentage, how much of the processor is it utilizing? And a driver that, it typically uses more than 50%, may have some sort of setup problem. You may want to take a look at the setup problem, or you may need to maybe assign that to an expansion processor, like we did with the XP diagnostic driver and putting it on the XP3. You may want to offload that to the expansion processor itself, because again, with an expansion processor, you don't get the processing power of it, but you do offload the overall percentage of it to the memory and to that expansion processor. The memories, same type of thing. You see the peak memory that's allowed. The maximum amount used by the driver is listed here. And again, you want to be careful with that. But the other part about this that you'll notice is that there are ports that are set up here as well, so that you can see how they're set up. For example, the 8064 driver that I have set up on the ESC2 Plus, port 1 is listed as such right here. The Roku is the MCAS at 1900, and it gives you all the IO ports that are used by the driver itself. So again, if you feel like the device or the driver or the third-party device seems to be running slow, or it doesn't seem to be effective. You may want to click on this driver tab and see what it is as you're pressing some buttons. For example, I'm just going to press a quick button on my or actually, you know what, I'll do one better, where you can kind of check to see what's going on with the different devices and how they work. So as you're looking here, you see the XP Diagnostic, the weather came up here real quick. I'm just going to hit check weather on my remote, and you'll see that it used a little bit of the memory and it fluctuates, but not too much there. So it does give us that opportunity to take a look. There's that weather information again, 20%, and then it drops right down. Okay. The other part about this that you'll notice is when you start having those creating those macro sequence and having those activities being launched from the devices, such as if I were to press a button on, say, the watch Roku on my remote, you'll see that it will actually trigger that Roku to communicate and connect. There we go. So you can see it fluctuate there. All right, RTI panel. So RTI panel incorporates not just RTI panel iOS and Android devices, but also the virtual panel devices. And for example, the virtual panel that I have set up on my system here is just set up as such, and you can see it's currently on and working, no problem there. If I were to turn it off, you'll see that it goes away. Pretty quick and easy in that way. So that being said, if I, sorry about that, if I were to launch it back on, you'll see valid, LAN, connected, done. It's on and it's playing. It works out well. So this will give you all that information. It will also show you the network type. So if you're utilizing, say, a remote or a remote access, and you want to see what that, making sure that it's connected, that it would come up as WAN and then connected or not connected state, or if there's any sort of timeout in regards to it. Generally speaking, you know, the important information you'll find is what's the current state of it? Is it connected or not? That's what you really want to know if the client is having maybe some problems with their communication. If it's constantly going connected, not connected, connected, not connected, more than likely it's probably a networking issue or a communication between the RTI panel device itself and that network, that wireless network that's in the location or in that area, that it's having trouble maintaining that state of connect throughout the system itself. Yeah. So you'll get all of them listed here. And again, it's important when you, and we talk about this point quite a bit, that within Integration Designer itself, when you start adding in the devices, like I've named mine virtual panel here, this is how they would show up on that XP Diagnostics. So it's important to name these for what they are, where they are, which ones they are. Instead of having iPad, or virtual panel, I've got them set up and named correctly. That will help you identify which one is which. All right, let's go to Zigbee. This is a very important one. Now, first, before I start off with why it's important here, I want to make sure that you understand that when you are working with Zigbee and you're starting to put it into a project, there's a couple of things that we want you to make sure to do. The first thing is when you plug it into the processor and you're getting it set up, you need to test that Zigbee network area. You need to download the Zigbee network test driver bundle, which is found on the RTI support page under the technical support area, or excuse me, under the training support area and technical bulletins. And I can show you where that is here. Let's do that real quick. And it is important to do this because when you start working on these different systems that require the Zigbee communication, being that it's the primary communication, you want to make sure you have a solid communication connection with it each and every time. So, for example, we have the Zigbee installation, and here's all the different information you can utilize about how to set it up correctly. Here's a video about the technology. There's all sorts of information about how to set it up, as well as the Zigbee range test that we would highly encourage you to do before you start going out to the job. So please make sure to visit the resources section and check out the Zigbee information. Now, all that being said, if you've done all of that information and you're ready to and you're ready to start testing it, you'll notice right away that I actually just grabbed my T2X and it instantly came on and it instantly showed up here. Now, what this all this information, what does this all mean? Well, Rx is the number of bytes received from the remote, right? TX would be the number that it's, or not, well, not just number it's received, but it's also TX, meaning that the number of bytes that is being sent by the XP6S, okay? And you'll notice that it's keeping track of when the last information received was 1536. Yeah, it's about right for today. And it's showing us that so that if you are having communication issues, you can see that on both ends, not just the XP6S, but also the T2X that I'm currently using and when that information is received. So that if that communication is having issues or your client is stating, well, I'm not sure which area that I need to, I can't get that communication. The buttons aren't working right. You can see when the last information received was, and if is it a Zigbee issue or what else is it? What else can I, how can I take out certain areas that could be causing a problem? How do I whittle it down? So the amount sent and the amount received on both fronts. The Zigbee coordinator, the main device, as well as the end device, the T2X. Now you may say, well, hold on, where's that T4X, right? Well, you remember that we added in the XP Diagnostic second iteration of it and had it pulled up. Well, you'll notice now on that Zigbee device, there we have it, the XP3 and the T4X that I currently have set up on that device. Now you can also notice, and you may hear little clicks that are going on that said device, right? Anytime that activity area turns green, that means that transmission is happening, that the activity is happening. And when there's no more activity, it goes gray. So it's a good way to be able to show if are you having that type of information being sent, being received correctly each and every time. Now, Vincent, you are an expert in Zigbee. What do the RSSIs and LQIs and these packets mean?
I have no idea. No, I'm just kidding. The RSSI is the received signal strength indicator. You want to pay attention to that one because that's going to tell you exactly the type of signal you have. It's very much like a wireless access point and the reading as well. Negative 63, I believe that's what I'm looking at, is a good reading. If you get anything in the negative 40, 50, 60, you're in good shape. Anything in the negative 70s, that's good. But once you start approaching 80s and 90s, that's where your Zigbee signal strength is dropping out. And that could have to do with a lot of things: range, interference, something wrong with the way the antenna or transceiver is situated. So the received signal strength indicator is a really good indicator of where you stand when it comes to communication and being able to maintain communication. Now, before I go over the LQI, I want you to know that the XP Diagnostics is an excellent way of determining if you have established Zigbee communication with your remotes. However, I do recommend using the counter driver that comes with the procedure Tyler just showed you on the remotes, because right now you're probably seeing a static footprint of what's happening with that T4X. It's probably standing still in one area. Ideally, you want to be roaming around the room, getting to know the dead spots, if there are any, or soft spots. So this is good to evaluate whether you have a signal and what that is, but fall back on the diagnostics that are available on the actual controllers for better range testing. Now, LQI, we talked about received signal strength. LQI is link quality index. The link quality index is kind of like a packet test So if you're talking about, let's say, Wi-Fi and a router, how good is that communication happening between the different devices? Is there any fallout or drop off? If you see values in the 250 range, you're pretty good. If you start seeing some wacky LQI, your system might be operating effectively, but you are having packet loss. And where that's going to bite you is when you're doing some heavy duty cross communication between several Zigbee networks, or maybe you have networks that haven't been calibrated correctly. For example, maybe you situated a network too close to another network. Maybe there's too much overlap and interference. That could cause packet loss, therefore an LQI that is unsatisfactory. So make sure that the LQI is in the 250 range. 255 is ideal. And if you start to get wacky numbers, start to question if you have some cross communication going on that's interfering. Let me give you an example of that in my own house. So in my own house, like most RTI employees, we have a lot of test systems going on. So theoretically, the Zigbee networks we're setting up could be interfering with the Zigbee networks that are part of our house. So whenever I look at LQI on my regular network, I might see a weird number because my test network is kind of overlapping with that real network and therefore causing packet loss. So, in that situation, there's nothing I can really do unless there's a real issue, but kind of know where you stand. Again, RSSI, you want to see numbers anywhere below -75. Anything in the 90s, -90 and up is pretty bad. -100, there's absolutely no signal whatsoever. So that's the story about the statistics. Sorry, that was a little long-winded, but it's really important.
That's why I wanted you in on it, my man. Perfect. And once again, the activity, you'll see that turn green when there is activity between the two devices. All right, let's go back to the XP6. There's our T2X. And let's go ahead and go to the next one, UPnP. So what is UPnP? Well, UPnP is the tab. This tab will show all the devices on the network, including devices like the ESC2 Plus and other devices that you may have on there. For example, here's my Roku that I'm currently connected to on the network that has also been identified as a UPnP type of device. Now, some devices, keep in mind that you would actually need to go in to that third-party device and say, yes, I want you to be discovered on UPnP. You can't rely on just it to be automatically set up in that way. So if you're not seeing it here and you're trying to get it set up, for example, I'll go back to Integration Designer here. If I was to say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to add in a certain driver, why don't we just try Yamaha real quick? As an example, I know they use UPnP too. So if I were to add in a Yamaha driver into the mix, I'll just quickly add this. All right, I add in the Yamaha, I go into the driver properties and I'm going to set it up. And I can, of course, do it via network and there's other options, but you see it says UPnP friendly name. Well, the method for finding AP address when UPnP is used, processor will find it on the network regardless of IP address, which is great. But if we look at that XP Diagnostic, and I'll jump back to that real quick, you'll notice that it's not necessarily on here. I've got a couple of Netgear devices, but I don't have that. Well, that device itself may actually have to have that feature turned on instead of it. And yes, it is actually plugged into my network. I do promise you that. I do have one plugged in and turned on, but it's not showing here because I would most likely need to go into it and turn on that network setting for UPnP. So just keep that in mind, that if you're not seeing it here, it won't, it may not be here. Now, ESC2 devices, those are in here and on, and you should be easily identifiable and recognized right away. So just keep that in mind, that those devices will come on, and if it's not listing there, you may need to go into it And this is where what my original statement of making sure that you understand how to control the device before you actually try to control it comes into play, because now you can make sure that you're setting it up correctly on both ends, not just the RTI side of things. The system variables tab. Now this tab is going to allow you to monitor any system variable or system flag in the system. And the way it kind of works is it's a two steps type of system. You select the type of device or driver, the source driver or the internal that you want to monitor, and be able to, and then select the option for it. For example, if I were to say select the RTI 8064 driver, oh, sorry about that, there we go. It would then change the secondary area for me to say, okay, do I want to, what do I want to monitor? What system variable do I want to monitor? Now, it's not going to be minimized based on, how it's set up in terms of, certain variables or variables that are not being used. All the ones and how you set it up in Integration Designer are what will be listed. Case in point, there's only the workstation set up. As I had set it up in Integration Designer itself, I had only said there's one source available for one, which is RTI Music, and the zone count was also only one with a zone name of workstation. Okay. Thus, when we open up the XP Diagnostics, we notice that under the drop-down, the only settings available for the specific zones are either selected or the workstation. If I were to add a secondary zone of audio in, then the feedback available for it would be there. Now, if we were to go in and say, okay, I want to monitor the workstation power, right? I want to make sure that it's in, and I press, add, it will come up in the integer and tell me 0 or 1, yes or no, in this case, as a system variable. Or if I were to go into the system manager and say, okay, system manager, I want to know what if source one, let me find, if the tag for volume level is visible on the virtual panel, the system manager tag value for visible is an integer 0 or 1, yes or no. So let me open up that virtual panel here, and let's show you what that looks like here real quick. So if I were to go into the tag level, you'll see that it's currently not there, right? And there's a reason for it. Check it out. The minute I hit plus or minus, it changed. It went to true. You'll also notice that the workstation power changed to a true value in a Boolean state. So it's monitoring this and gives you the opportunity to make sure that it's working the way it needs to. Let's add another one here real quick. Why don't we do tag volume? Or actually, you know what? We'll do one even further. Why don't we do the macro flag? The macro flag's in here, and we're going to add in the flag for the audio mute. And it's currently false state. Well, if I were to take my virtual panel once again and click on the button for mute, you notice how it's now true. False. So it's giving me that valuable information right then and there. The tough part about this is you need to, it gives you the ability to really narrow down the focus of exactly what you need to test versus not. What isn't the client seeing? What should they be seeing? Things of that nature, and add those into the mix. And you can do that for the system manager, the drivers you've added in, the diagnostics, if there's any sort of information in regards to the diagnostics, but there typically isn't, if I remember right. And then the XP macro flags, all 256 that are available that you can utilize in the system itself and be able to understand. So it's a great way to be able to identify on a very specific level what you're looking for. Now, that being said, there's also the flags tab. So if I can do the flags here, what does the flags tab do? Well, the flags tab just makes it a little easier for you. Sometimes having all that data, you just need to test the flag. You don't need to sift through everything that you have in there or go through it. You just want to test the certain flags. So you can just choose that XP macro flag. Now, keep in mind that this is the processor flag. This isn't the individual device flags that we're testing. If you're going to use internal logic-based flags on the device itself, that's going to be a little bit different. And I'll show you how to look for those as well in a minute. But here we have that flag 1 once again. I hit the word add. Currently says false. Let's bring up my virtual panel once again. I'll hit the mute button. Changes to true. So very simple. Gives me the simple value of that flag versus the system variable, which is giving me the actual type and the value itself. So a little more data here for you. Now, the other part about this that a lot of people forget is, as you're going through and monitoring this, you need to make sure that you're testing things. You want to test all aspects on it and then kind of whittle it down. So that brings us to the log. The log will give us the ability to say, okay, I want to know what happens when I press this, or I want to know what happens when this automation event happens. And it's built out as such: events, devices, user, and drivers. Now, the events are going to be those things like a button push or a specific scheduled event or the automation-based events that you can use, whether they're drivers or sense type events that you can use from any of the automation side. But the drivers also will give you a look as to what system manager is doing, because technically it's an automation-based event driver that's happening in the background. So for example, if I drop this option down and it says none, low, medium, and high, this refers to the amount of log level or how much information is going to be displayed in that particular category. For example, if I select high on the driver event, and then I'm going to open up my virtual panel here real quick, and I select watch Roku, check out what happens. Activities start. This is System Manager, where it's going to start in the workspace on virtual panel, the driver event, video on in the workspace, power on the Roku, the activity selected, Roku, the activity ready, Roku and workstation, macro start, change to page 10 on virtual panel, which it did, and it ends. And it also says, okay, I'm also going to send an IR command to from the XP6 to the Samsung TV. There's the command for it. I'm also going to send a command to the Roku. What does that look like? Well, it's going to turn it on. I'm going to, and you're getting at the whole level of detail. So here's the base level. Here's the real high level information that you're getting here. Let me show you what that looks like on Integration Designer real quick. Pull that activity up. On the workspace for watch Roku, here's where that plays in. The activity start. There's our please wait page, the video on, the power on source, the activity selected, and then activity ready. Well, that's exactly what we just saw here. Change to page 10, the XP6, power's on, power, etc. What else can we show on here? Well, you can show not just that, but you can also show specific button pushes if you want. So if I wanted to know what happens when I do a medium level button push, right? Okay, so a button push. Well, let's try this mute one again. Button down. Device, the virtual panel, the transport method was through network, which it is because it's on the network, it's virtual panel. The driver command, system manager was here. It also, the button went down. There's Ethernet communication. It muted the information, and there we go. Any difference if I change it to high? Well, let's check real quick. Let me clear this out so that we can get a good look at it. So it's a pretty standard information here that we're getting based on this. Just a simple toggle workstation, and we're ready to go with it. So it's a great way to be able to identify certain aspects of that driver and what's currently happening to it. What if I were to press something along the lines of listen to music? Notice how it goes through the whole process once again and shows us everything that's in there. All the information that we need. It gives me commands. There's a delay, another command, another delay, and then it plays Mr. Hetfield's favorite one, and it starts playing it right away. And as you can see, it's playing it right away. So everything seems to have worked out great. Let me clear this out real quick. I'm going to now push a button on my RK1 Plus. And what happens there? Well, notice how it shows not only the RK1 Plus, but it's obviously a transport method to RS-45, and it shows exactly what happens here. So this gives us a lot of information to be able to test. The beautiful part about this for you is that you have the opportunity now to create this and test out what might happen when I press this button. Or notice how I'm pressing and holding the volume down button, and it's sustaining as I do it. Button goes up. So it gives you a lot of information very, very quickly that that will help you in terms of not just what's happening in the right now and what the device is, but you can even go into the specific driver aspect of things and go, okay, what happens when I decide I want to watch TV on the Roku side of things, right? I press watch Roku. Oh, I should have turned these off. I apologize. Let me reset the levels here. I'll clear this out and then we'll go back to my Roku. In fact, we'll turn off the entire system real quick and then I'll hit watch Roku. And you'll notice that it's just going to show me the information for the Roku instead of all the other information. So you can understand what the command was, it sent it, it then disconnected for it, and we're in good shape. Or even listen to music. Oh, pardon me. Let me change that one. There we go. Oh, and then we'll listen to music. So we should be getting a lot of information here. And again, it gives us options to be able to understand what's currently happening in the system versus not. Okay. So really what my advice to you is that when you start working on a project and you're wondering, hey, is the commands being sent? Is it working the way I expect it to work? Check out not just the log, but check the communications, make sure it all works the exact way you want to. And as you go through, you'll need to understand that, these different types of devices or what's currently happening. And the one that you want to make sure to understand is that this events driver, this is where you'll get that system manager information versus driver system manager. So that's something that we need to adjust. But right here, this will give you the most amount of information versus just the standard, just the basic, yes, it's connected, no, it's not. This will give you the entire sequence of events based on the system manager driver or any other drivers that are currently working and all the information regarding it. So if you're testing all these different buttons, they're working great, you're having, you're deciphering it and you still can't figure out what's going on with the system. That's when you hit this get report. And you've tested all of that information, it'll compile this report. It'll give you all the log information. And again, as you're going through and doing that log, you don't want to clear it out, but you can just go through, do a whole bunch of tests. You can hit that get report and be able to have all that information pulled up for you so that you can see what's currently going on, so that when you do call into tech support or talk to one of our incredible dealer experience, sales engineers, you can have this and you can say, look, this is what I've been doing. This is what I've tried, so that you don't have to spend more time on the phone with them to go through everything you've already done. So this will save you a lot of time in regards to getting it set up and working. So that being said, that kind of goes through the entire, diagnostic driver in and of itself. I know there's going to be some questions out there, or maybe Vincent's received a few already. But I guess, in terms of the overall key takeaways that I have for you in regards to the XP Diagnostic driver, don't be afraid of it. It is easy to use. It's just understanding the different tabs and how they work. Make sure you have an understanding of the device you're trying to control before you actually try to control it. And then make sure that you have all the connections suitably connected with solid wires each and every time, and you'll be in great shape. So with that, I want to make sure that we do have some time for questions. Vincent, did we get anything that we need to talk about or show?
Yeah, sure. So someone's asking, is it possible to send tomorrow an email to ask your recommendations about an upcoming yacht project. So our RTI sales engineering here at RTI is responsible for design requests. So you should always feel free to contact our sales engineering or myself, Vincent.bova@rticontrol.com, with any kind of design request, even if it's something you're unsure about, no matter how small or large the project is. Some good questions were, oh, sorry, here comes another one. We know that Diagnostics has a very large footprint. As a result, we try not to add this device. So is there a way to keep it dormant? I won't read the rest because that's exactly what we can show you. So if Tyler, you could go back to the driver tab in the software. So every driver has the ability, that would be the software, not the XP Diagnostics.
Sorry, I thought you meant Diagnostics.
So if you click on XP Diagnostics, and then you click on driver utilities under driver configuration, you'll have the ability to disable the driver. That will automatically remove all the bandwidth that's used up when you're using drivers. Now, my recommendation is always to remove drivers you're not using. With the XP Diagnostics, though, it's a little tricky because you could be costing yourself a little more work later by just deleting it. So it's better to disable it than actually delete it, because what if later on you run into problems? Now you have to add it, sync the system again, and then you're back where you were. So in my opinion, disable it if you're not using it. It doesn't have a very large footprint. It also depends on how large your system is. So that should help things. This way you could just enable it when you need to. You still might have to resync it, but it's a little easier. I don't think it'll require you to do anything other than the processor.
Yeah.
So someone's asked about the levels for the Zigbee tab, and I like this suggestion that maybe we should have some kind of a guideline to what the values mean. Like what is -70? Is that good? Is it bad? Is it adequate? So definitely we'll recommend that idea. But I can tell you that when you first look at it, it does look a little daunting, but you quickly get accustomed to what those levels mean after a while. So hopefully, if they don't add it, hopefully it won't be a bad learning curve. Someone wants to know if they could have this file from the course. I don't know if that'll help them, but that would
Sure.
be a request.
Yeah, and we are recording this too. So, I mean, if you want
Yeah.
to build out a file based on what you have, you can always refer to the training video that we'll put together. But it's not, I mean, the file isn't anything special. I literally put in an XP6S, few different drivers of devices I had in the office. I obviously added a few different things into them based on showing examples. But if you would like the file, I'm happy to share it.
So we do have some more questions here. Is this feature available in ID9? Yes, XP Diagnostics has always been available. We
I
probably
think they
should
were
have
referring
had-
to the disable enable feature.
Oh, good question. I don't know. It's a good question. I'll find out for you right now. How does that sound? In the meantime, I'm using a T2X, seeing the green square activating when pressing the buttons. That's good. In fact, there is T1B Plus at the same time. I'm watching the gray turn green. Still not sure why I don't get the same info as Tyler was showing. Not sure which info you mean. You should be getting the receive, the transmit, and the RSSI and LQI. If you're not getting that, that could be an issue.
It does not look like the enable disable feature is in ID9.
Oh, there you go. That's another reason to switch then. Let's see if we have any more questions here. So he's saying he's not seeing the RSSI and LQI. for a T1B plus. That's unusual.
I would
That
check
is-
the connections, in the properties of that device, just to make sure you do have it set up for two-way and then Zigbee for, for the feedback if you are doing feedback. Otherwise, what you might want to do is, turn off the remote and then and send the file again to the processor, and then turn it on once that processor has reestablished itself and reestablished the Zigbee communication, and then turn it back on. Maybe it just needs to grasp that information again.
Yeah, Gary, you could send me the file so I could check it out on my own too. I don't have a T1B plus here, but I should have one in a few days. Been meaning to get one. Let's see. Looks like all the questions. So real quick, I just want to share a little bit of my experience with some of those driver tabs on XP Diagnostics. If we could just go back real quick to the XP Diagnostics screen. The system variables, those you're going to want to use that, in my opinion, and this is come in handy. If I'm not getting feedback on the screen, maybe I programmed a toggle button that's not toggling, and now I'm not sure why. Or if I put a text box in and the information is not filling in. This is a great way to see if the processor is communicating the correct information. The flags is self-explanatory. If you have a system that's using a lot of flags within a macro, it's a great way to kind of make sure while you're running the macro that you can see the flag status real time instead of just relying on the macro to set and clear flags. Also the log is like Tyler said, would be a great time saver for tech support. So if you call them, if your problem applies to something, XP Diagnostics would help. If you could have that in advance, it'll definitely get them accustomed to what's going on quicker, alleviate the call queue, and help you get off the phone quicker. So we appreciate that. Doesn't look like there's any more questions.
Let me see if I can pull up that T1B plus real quick and see if that's so we can get that answered real quick here for that person. In 1 second here.
Should have it.
I got one right here, no problem.
Beautiful.
It's supposed to help if I turn it on.
It's quick. All right.
All
I'll
right,
go back to XP.
back. Gotta wait for the processor to
You go to the
reestablish.
status and see if that thing is alive yet.
It's disconnected right now.
Oh, there you go.
It'll just give a second here. Oh, an XP6.
Just refresh it. Oh, there you go. Okay.
All right. So Zigbee. Double check the
Oh, did you
I want to make sure the properties are set right here. Two-way Zigbee, yeah, that's right. Should be on the XP6.
when you set up separate Zigbee networks, did that affect anything? I don't know. Should work out of the box either way.
Should be tied. I'll go to the system
You probably
properties real
didn't.
quick.
Oh yeah, you have to set up some sources probably. That's what it is.
Plus,
Go to the source setup tab real quick on the T1B. Properties,
sorry, yeah.
source setup. Yeah, just
there we go.
define a couple of sources there, like the Roku. Hey, now sync that up and then press the Roku button.
We'll figure it out here for y'all. No problem.
Okay.
Present that. Just take a second for it to reload.
Have here that second Roku button.
Says it reconnects, and as soon as it finishes loading, we'll load it in. Interesting.
There
There we go.
goes. Yep, there it is.
Yeah, seems to be working. You're muted, Vincent.
Sorry, Gary, you could send me that file to make sure
Yeah,
that things
we'll get it
look
figured out.
okay if you don't figure it out. But there's no remote that's Zigbee related that shouldn't show up in the list. Of course, you want to put the counter driver on too. You can't do that with a P1B, but if you ever have a remote that isn't displaying.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you everybody so much. If you do have additional questions, please feel free to let us know what we can do to help. And as always, from Vincent and myself and the rest of the team at RTI, thank you so much for your support. Thank you so much for your dedication to the fastest custom installation ever. And we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have a great one, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.